Translator, Ninetales. Editor, Ninetales. Senior Brother Q was finally struck by true fear. At this rate, he'll beat me to death with that small wooden stick. He truly wished Chin-Mu had been holding a knife instead. Heck, even a dull one would do. A small wooden stick naturally carried little might, yet after so many beatings, his face had swollen like a pig's. Even his eyes had narrowed into two slits, his vision blurred and wavering. Black and green bruises stained his skin, and some of his flesh had been pounded into paste by the thrashing. Even his joints had received special care from Chin-Mu. Chin-Mu had deliberately targeted ligaments and tendons, not bone. Once ligaments and tendons were torn, the slightest movement would summon a pain that drilled to the marrow. To be beaten to death by a small wooden stick truly was too horrifying. One wouldn't die at once. Instead, with every passing moment, pain and dread would multiply several-fold under the drawn-out beating. The beast herd that had been thundering over their heads was nowhere to be seen now, having scattered the instant they made it out of the gate to the ruins. Chin-Mu's strength was also ebbing away. He didn't know how long he had swung his knife around, but he could not keep it up. After all, he had not only been constantly dodging Senior Brother Q's sword, he had also been evading the hooves and claws of the giant beasts they had been fighting beneath. His legs, too, were sore and swollen from unceasingly executing his irregular footwork. Even though Butcher's training often came with bouts of madness, he still understood Chin-Mu had limits and would never train him past the point of exhaustion. Chin-Mu no longer had the strength to keep swinging his knife and could only rely on sheer will to press on. He knew that as long as Senior Brother Q retained even the faintest strand of vital chi, it would be his own head that rolled. He could only continue beating Senior Brother Q to death. Thud! Senior Brother Q collapsed to the ground. No longer able to endure the beating, his treasured sword fell with a clank. Chin-Mu flung away the wooden stick and seized the sword, but could not lift it. His arms were emptied of strength. Chin-Mu staggered forward and instead kicked the sword's hilt. Its tip slowly angled toward Senior Brother Q, who, barely aware of his surroundings, struggled to squirm away. But he could not. His ligaments and tendons were in complete disarray. He couldn't even muster the strength to twitch a muscle. Paralyzed, Senior Brother Q could only watch as Chin-Mu, with all his might, adjusted the direction of the treasured sword and kicked it toward his neck. It scraped along the ground, dragging dirt with it as it crept forward in tiny increments toward Senior Brother Q, until, with one final kick, it pierced straight through his neck. Blood spilled, pooling around the wound as he fought to breathe, gurgling through the blood that welled from his throat. Relief swept over Chin-Mu. His limbs went slack and he collapsed to the floor. He had never been so exhausted before. Lying beside a corpse felt disgusting, so Chin-Mu tried to inch away. Only, he had to give up because his body would not obey. It wasn't Chin-Mu's first time seeing a corpse. The woman who emerged from the cowskin and Senior Brother Q's junior brothers had also become corpses. Granny C once brought him to a neighboring village to help deliver a baby. Aside from being a tailor, Granny C was also a midwife who helped expectant mothers in the area give birth. However, when they arrived, the village had already turned into a graveyard. Male or female, young or old, it didn't matter. Everyone, including the expectant mother, was dead. Chin-Mu's mind had gone blank, as though his spirit were drifting through the sky, floating above the village and taking in the massacre from afar. Granny C later woke him from his trance, saying the gruesome scene had frightened the life out of him and forced his soul to leave his body. She had to pull his soul back and stuff it back in. Granny hadn't told him who had slaughtered that entire village. Instead, she told him such a thing was exceedingly common in the great ruins. In light of that, she sternly warned him, "Never give your enemies any opportunities." Senior Brother Q's corpse made Chin-Mu uncomfortable, yet it was nothing uncommon in the great ruins. Here, the strong preyed upon the weak. It was survival of the fittest. Having lived in the great ruins since he was young, Chin-Mu had long grown accustomed to skirmishes between strange beasts. To him, Senior Brother Q's corpse was no different from the carcasses of animals. As he lay there, trying to melt into the surroundings, Chin-Mu suddenly heard footsteps drawing near. He struggled to turn his head toward the sound and identify what was approaching. To his complete shock, it was Senior Sister Ching who greeted him, her face swollen beyond recognition and resembling a pig's. Step by step, she limped toward him, using her treasured sword as a crutch. Chin-Mu tried to rise, but his limbs were swollen and racked with pain. He could only wait there, silently circulating the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. His vital chi slowly stirred, gently welling up and flowing into his aching muscles. Wherever his vital chi passed, the pain eased, his senses sharpening as the burning sensation faded. Senior Sister Ching continued to limp toward him, step by step. Fighting Chin-Mu had essentially left her legs crippled. Her face had also suffered countless kicks, the last of which had been the most ruthless. Chin-Mu had poured all his strength into that kick, flattening her delicate features like the tail of a poison dragon. In its current swollen state, her face looked as bloated as noodles left soaking overnight. All of her teeth were gone. Blood and saliva dripped from the corner of her mouth and splashed to the ground. Her hands, however, were unexpectedly steady as they gripped her treasured sword in a manner that plainly displayed her hatred and desire to tear Chin-Mu into 1,000 pieces. Chin-Mu tried to cultivate faster, urging the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique to accelerate. He wanted to recover his strength more quickly, but the fierce battle he had just fought had taken too much from him. Only by breaking the Spirit Embryo wall and awakening the Spirit Embryo Divine Treasure could Chin-Mu be considered a true martial practitioner. To beat a martial practitioner like Senior Brother Q to death, despite not being one himself, could already be called a great feat. But that was all it was. He did not have the strength to continue fighting Senior Sister Ching. Senior Sister Ching finally reached Chin-Mu. She tried to speak, but her mouth and throat were so swollen she could only let out a gurgle. Fury surging, she lifted her treasured sword and pitched forward, stabbing ruthlessly toward Chin-Mu. But suddenly she froze, her treasured sword unable to continue downward, as if it had struck an invisible barrier. What a cute little lady. This granny is quite fond of looking at you. An elderly woman appeared in their line of sight, walking toward them with a basket in hand. Fear flashed through Senior Sister Ching's eyes. She trembled at the sight of the woman and slowly backed away from Chin-Mu. Before she could retreat far, however, a voice thundered from behind her. Mu'er, you actually used a tiny wooden stick to play around with my pig-slaughtering knife skill and took 5,476 strikes before finally bringing this young fellow down. Yet what you ended up killing this little bastard with a sword. Struggling to turn her head, Senior Sister Ching saw a group of grotesque figures approaching. Among them was a blind man with a cane, a man missing a leg, a man without any limbs, and a muscular man missing the lower half of his body. One of the more able men carried the muscular man in a large bamboo basket on his back, and the others carried the limbless man on a stretcher. All of these people looked extremely miserable. The only one who seemed relatively normal was the middle-aged man carrying the bamboo basket. However, his face was completely disfigured. It looked as though it had been skinned, giving him a sinister, frightening appearance. The muscular man, who only had the upper half of his body, was the one who had spoken. Rage flooded his fearsome face as he glared at Chin-Mu and scolded him from afar. Looks like you still haven't trained enough. If your knife skill was honed enough, you wouldn't even need a small wooden stick or even a knife. You'd be able to chop him to death with your bare hands. Granny C, Grandpa Butcher, Grandpa Apothecary. Chin-Mu rasped, a sigh of relief escaping him. All of you are here? We raised you with our blood, sweat, and tears. Of course we were worried, Granny C replied, snickering. Since this was your first night away from home and you spent it with an unfamiliar woman, we just had to come take a look. Chin-Mu blinked and asked, How long have all of you been here? We've been here since you were furiously clashing with that young fellow under the bellies of those beasts. Butcher snorted. How else would I know that you used a total of 5,476 strikes? Chin-Mu's face darkened. These old geezers had clearly arrived early during the fight, yet they still let him fight to the death and nearly lose his life. And then he understood why the herd of strange beasts hadn't attacked him, or Senior Brother Q. Butcher had frightened them off. The people from outside the village said that Granny and all the grandpas were bad people, Could that be true? Chinmu thought to himself. But I think they're good people, he reassured himself. They must have watched from afar because they believed I could defeat that senior brother Q. An overlord body is far superior to a spirit body, Blind said, propping himself up with his cane and smiling at thin air. We're all very disappointed that you've been reduced to such a miserable state. Grandpa Blind, I'm over here. Chinmu coughed softly. I know where you are, Blind said with a smile, turning to face him. You defeated that young fellow using a stick, which means I have taught you well. Don't be proud of that, though. You possess an overlord body, after all. It's only natural for you to be stronger than him. From today onwards, your training will be much more intense. Don't make that bitter face. Why are you so pleased with yourself, Blind? Butcher said coldly. He was clearly using my knife skill. And why are you lecturing a corpse? Translator Ninetails, Editor Ninetails. What shall we do with this senior sister Qing? Chinmu barely forced himself upright. He looked toward senior sister Qing, who still had not yet recovered from her shock. Why don't we? Granny Sai's eyes brightened as a wicked thought rose. She gave Chinmu a shove, nearly toppling the exhausted youth, and said with a teasing grin, Why don't we spare her, so she can be your little bride? You were so cute when you were a toddler, but now that you're all grown up, you aren't quite as cute. However, you can have a chubby baby with this young lady. That baby would definitely be very cute as well. After all, Granny still adores children. Chinmu glanced at senior sister Qing, whose head now looked like a pig's. Granny, I think I'd rather not. Shunk. Then we should just kill her, Cripple said. No one knew when it happened, but Cripple had already drifted behind senior sister Qing. He drove the blade clean through her heart, an innocent smile hanging on his face. Gee, Grandpa Cripple, why did you kill her? Chinmu asked, stammering. Cripple drew the knife back out, his smile turning faintly puzzled. You said you didn't want her, so she obviously needed to die. Chinmu felt wronged, though not because he wished to make a baby with senior sister Qing. He was only a child of 11 or 12, after all. Besides these old monsters he saw every day, even the people in the neighboring villages were fiendish existences. It was rare for him to meet someone around his own age. Even without playmates, he still carried the heart of a child. Let's go home, village chief declared, turning his head to look toward the ruins within the valley. All of us are disabled in some way, so none of us can carry you. You'll have to walk back on your own. Apothecary smiled at Chinmu, then said, Ah, that's right. We prepared the blood of the 4 spirits. Since you didn't come home last night, I still have some with me. Chinmu nodded, taking the 4 porcelain cups Apothecary handed him. He drank the blood of the 4 spirits, and as he struggled to walk, he circulated the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique to refine and digest the power within that spirit blood. While doing so, he also recounted to everyone the strange happenings he had witnessed in the ruins. Granny Sai's calm expression rippled. Devils and gods? A gigantic face woven from darkness and skeleton maidens? Interesting. The other villagers also found Chinmu's tale intriguing, yet none of them offered any further opinions. Unable to hold it in, Chinmu asked, Granny, aren't all of you curious about the story behind the ruins? Apothecary sighed. The kingdom of gods that once prospered was burned into ashes long ago. Now you tell us that gods' bones were clattering and dancing in the night. Could it be that even in death, they still refused to die? Death stared at Apothecary, reading his lips, then replied, Whether they refuse or not, what reason do they have to exist after already dying? There's no point caring about this place's story. Are you really deaf? Apothecary asked suspiciously, his gaze dropping to Deaf's ears. Forged from snow-white iron, Deaf's ears were entirely metal. They replaced the flesh and blood ears he should have had, and had even sealed over his ear canals. Deaf plucked the metal ears from both sides of his head. From the inner portions, 3-inch iron plugs jutted out. Only by stabbing these into his ear canals could the metal ears be fixed firmly to his head. Stab these into your ear canals, Deaf snapped coldly. Then you'll find out if I'm really deaf. Apothecary smiled faintly and said no more. Deaf then plugged his 2 iron ears back into his ear canals, turned to Mute and said, These ears have been getting a bit uncomfortable lately. I need you to help me adjust them. Mute the blacksmith nodded in response. This elderly family left Chin-Mu speechless. He couldn't understand how all of them could be far more interested in Def's ear canals than the ruins. Muir, there are simply too many mysteries in the great ruins, Granny C said with a smile. Besides the kingdom of gods in this valley, there are countless other mysteries out there. If you spend all your time thinking about them, you won't be able to get anything else done. As their group headed toward Disabled Elderly Village, Village Chief said solemnly, "Since you could trade blows with that youth's treasure sword, using nothing but a 16-inch wooden stick as a blade, it's clear your strikes were not weak. This encounter has helped you improve greatly." "Why can't I control objects like they did?" Chin-Mu asked, his heart trembling. "My vital chi couldn't fill more than 16 inches of that willow branch." He was intensely envious of those youths who could command their swords with vital chi when he could not. Apothecary shook his head in silence. The vital chi of an ordinary person held no attributes. For them, controlling objects was impossible, because ordinary vital chi could not be used to perform such techniques. As an ordinary human, Chin-Mu being able to use his vital chi to sustain 16 inches of a willow branch and then use that willow branch to fight a martial practitioner like Senior Brother Q without it snapping was already an astonishing achievement. Neither your overlord body nor your spirit embryo divine treasure has awakened yet, so there's no need to worry. Village Chief gave Chin-Mu a steady look. Being able to defeat a skilled spirit embryo realm practitioner while still unawakened means that once your overlord body truly awakens, you will stand an entire level above everyone else. Granny C and the others were also proud of Chin-Mu's showing. Senior Brother Q was a peak martial practitioner in the spirit embryo realm. He could even use his chi to control his sword close to his body, which made it clear he wasn't far from stepping into the five elements realm. To have beaten Senior Brother Q to death with a small wooden stick, this proved, beyond doubt, that Village Chief had not lied about the overlord body that none of them had ever seen or heard of. The corners of Apothecary's eyes twitched as he thought. The truth that Muir only has an ordinary constitution will be exposed sooner or later. When that happens, these people will certainly overturn the entire world in despair. However, it truly is strange that he could beat a peak martial practitioner to death with a small wooden stick. Could he really have an overlord body? Or is it merely the influence of the spirit blood? Even with the vast knowledge stored in his mind, these unanswered questions still left Apothecary at a loss. After consuming the blood of the four spirits, the vital chi within Chin-Mu grew more and more vigorous. His inflamed muscles recovered and returned to normal. His blood flowed smoother, and his vital chi circulated even faster. As the fatigue slowly retreated from his body, his footsteps unconsciously quickened. Astonishment leapt onto the faces of Old Ma, Cripple, and the other villagers, yet they kept silent and continued following Chin-Mu. Chin-Mu had discovered that cultivating the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique while running could increase the speed of his cultivation. With the blood of the four spirits aiding him, that speed rose even further, until he forgot his surroundings entirely and sprinted faster and faster. He soon forgot the ache in his muscles as his pace continued to climb. His vital chi coursed through his body ever faster, permeating his flesh, bones, hair, and nails. Running with all his might, Chin-Mu's current speed gradually exceeded his former peak speed. Yet he did not realize it, only feeling more and more unburdened as he ran to his heart's content. Murky drops of sweat eventually began to gush from his body. Mixed within that sweat were bits of black filth and white granulated fat. Only. Chin-Mu sensed none of the changes taking place within him. Apothecary and Village Chief secretly exchanged amazed looks. "Old Ma, when did your vital chi begin refining your body?" Apothecary suddenly asked. "I was at the pinnacle of the spirit embryo realm then." Old Ma replied solemnly. "I had been training my fists when I suddenly unleashed my first divine art, fist body refinement art. My vital chi was like azure dragons, coiling around my arms." Apothecary then looked to Cripple, who answered as well. "I was also at the pinnacle of the spirit embryo realm. That day, I was trying to catch up to the wind. I wanted to walk through the sky and step upon the very edge of that gust, when in the next instant, I discovered the marvel of vital chi body refinement. My vital chi began whistling from every pore like wind itself, and I was wildly excited. But right after that, I fell out of the sky and nearly died. It was the same for me, Apothecary said with a sigh. I had been trying to refine my body by using my spirit embryo divine treasure as a furnace and my vital chi as herbs. That led me to discover the wonder of vital chi body refinement. Only then did my vital chi baptize my body like fire. Chin Mu, on the other hand, hasn't even broken his first wall, yet he has already begun body refinement. An overlord body truly is domineering, Cripple laughed. We spirit bodies can't help but envy it. Apothecary wore a strange expression, but said nothing further. An overlord body? If Chin Mu truly possessed an overlord body, he would not have been so startled. Cripple and Old Ma attributed all of this to Chin Mu having an overlord body, but Apothecary knew the truth. To be one step ahead of spirit bodies. Reaching body refinement so early with nothing but an ordinary human constitution, such a thing was enough that even a formidable practitioner like Apothecary, despite all his immense knowledge, could not help but feel astonished. Muir hasn't awakened his overlord body yet, but once he does, he'll be able to use his overlord body chi to control objects. Hey! Granny C said excitedly. Even Eternal Peace Empire's Imperial Preceptor wouldn't be able to hold a candle to him at the same age, right? Apothecary's heart sank as he looked toward Village Chief. Village Chief remained silent. The overlord body did not exist? So naturally there would never be any overlord body chi. Ordinary vital chi could never control objects, and once Chin Mu discovered that, the lie would be exposed. But before that, Chin Mu first had to awaken his overlord body, meaning he would have to break his spirit embryo wall. What did an ordinary human need to do to break a wall? Village Chief frowned. Did drinking the blood of the four spirits even have any effect on Chin Mu? How much longer could he conceal the truth from everyone?